In this video, we're going to be breaking down what hours of testing has revealed about the frozen arrow, how the frozen arrow compares to other pieces of equipment, and what my recommendations are for upgrading the frozen arrow for all players. And trust me, you guys want to stick around because there's testing in this video that has not been discussed anywhere else, and you guys could easily dominate with this info. To begin, let's take a look at the normal stats for the frozen arrow. As you guys can see, there are two main stats that we need to pay attention to: the slowdown percentage and the duration of slowdown, all of which is on screen currently. The added DPS is actually really nice as well, and you guys can see in the chart in the background that you guys can get 22% of the max DPS on a max queen added on if you get this equipment to level 27. But there's a lot of things we need to discuss before we declare the frozen arrow as good or bad, so I'm going to break those things down piece by piece. The first thing we need to talk about is the duration of the effect and whether this actually matters. Now, for the gameplay and the timers in this video, everything is on a 25 frames per second timer, so just to avoid any confusion, when it hits 25 it will go to the next second. When we look at the queen attacking with a base level frozen arrow, we can see that the frozen arrow only lasts half of a second, even though it's supposed to be 0.75 seconds. Now, this could be the animation itself or some error on my part, but it's pretty obvious the building being attacked is not frozen the entire time. But why would this happen? A level 1 frozen arrow is supposed to have 0.75 seconds of freeze duration, and that is the attack speed of the queen. The thing that is not accounted for, however, is the flight time of the arrow, and I think this is where the discrepancy is and why the frozen arrow does not saturate the freeze right off the bat. Ironically, this issue was addressed in the very first upgrade, after which you will have a full 1 second duration on the freeze and a consistently frozen target throughout the attack. But the obvious question we all have now is that if 1 second gets you continuous freeze, why do we have up to 3 seconds of freeze available at the max level? Of course, this could be useful with skeleton traps, CC troops, or even a poison tower, but is there any other use for it outside of that? When I first heard about this, I was super excited because I thought there was an underlying mechanism to how this works and that my testing would reveal the truth to me. But before we can get into understanding that, we need to understand the actual DPS increase and how that's factored in as well. Now, the main strength of the frozen arrow is the fact that it slows down and lasts over a period of time, granting us an effective DPS increase to any defense that it's attacking. Contrast this to the giant gauntlet, which grants you an effective hit point increase due to the damage reduction. Now, to determine the DPS decrease, I actually did a lot of testing on my own for a ton of frozen arrow levels. What I did was see how long it would take cannons to shoot normally versus when the default 30% reduction was applied to them. Normal cannons take 20/25ths of a second or 0.8 seconds to fire. The slowed cannon took 1 full second and 5/25ths of a second, which is approximately 30% slower. However, at level 2, you can see that because the duration of the slowdown increased, the time it takes to fire is just a little bit longer, even though the slowdown is 30% still. I ran the numbers for the first 14 levels, as is apparent in the chart in the background, and you guys can see the effective DPS decrease is rather close to the slowdown percentage, but it's always been a little bit more significant than the bonus implies. Of course, this could also be error on my part, but the effective DPS increase is rather similar to the percent slowdown. So why is this significant? Well, it tells us one thing: the amount of time on the slowdown duration clearly does not matter, because as soon as we cross over the 1 second threshold, any increase in time does not result in increased slowdown. This is a huge error for the frozen arrow. Essentially, after level 1, one of the stats becomes completely situational and borderline useless in my opinion, thus giving you only 2 stats worth of benefit. And this is not good for any piece of equipment, especially those that are at the epic level. But it's not good enough for us to look at the DPS decrease for defenses that fire 1 at a time. Instead, we need to look at the biggest killer of queens in the last 10 years, the single target Inferno. Normally, the Inferno tower takes 1.5 seconds to get to the second beam and 5 seconds to get to the third beam level. I analyzed the amount of time it took for the Inferno tower to get to that second beam because by the time the tower got to the third beam, usually the queen takes it out. At base level, you immediately get a 20% longer time frame for the Inferno tower to charge to that level. And generally, as you go on, it gets a little higher, but with some inconsistency, as you guys can see in the background testing clips. However, a big problem that I noticed was the fact that when I tried the 50% slowdown, the Inferno tower took a lot longer to speed up than usual, and I have no idea why at this level this was such a huge time change. To be honest with you guys, this is going to require a lot more testing once I get all the levels out of the way, and thus I have inconsistent results on my hero equipment sheet for this portion of the analysis. Regardless of that, I can confidently say you're going to get at least 20% more time versus single target Infernos as long as they're being targeted. And as seen in many of these examples, this can go all the way up to 33%. The other thing to measure is the slowdown and DPS versus continuous damage buildings like the Town Hall, but I have no idea how I would measure this reliably, so if you guys have any ideas, do let me know. Now with all of that being said, what are my recommendations for actually upgrading the Frozen Arrow? Those who have watched my video on the Giant Gauntlet have seen this chart before. This chart shows us that the price of levels 18 to 27 are the same as maxing a common piece of equipment. Thus, it's always a big discussion on whether or not we want to go past level 18. But I took it a step further this time and I put the slowdown percentage versus amount of glowy ores we have to invest. I chose glowy ores since they are the limiting resource currently, and as you guys can see, we get a decent amount of returns until we hit level 9, but after that, it's not that good. At level 9, you get a 45% slowdown out of the max 75%, which is 60% of the benefit of maxing the Frozen Arrow, so why go forward even further? Well, we need to consider that passive DPS increase and the potential 22% DPS that we get extra on a max level queen. At level 9, you only get 10% increase, which is 45% of the max level. But the DPS increase actually doesn't matter here. What actually matters is breakpoints. And those are the points where we need one less shot from the queen to finish off a building or a key defense. I made a chart of breakpoints of the most important defenses and storages, and in this chart you can see that there are 7 levels on the equipment where buildings take one less shot to destroy from the queen. 5 of those 7 breakpoints occur by level 9, so this further demonstrates the lack of need to further upgrade this piece of equipment. But with all of that being said, the utility of this equipment cannot be undermined in things like queen charges, since it can increase the survivability and snowball into something greater later on. Therefore, I would say if you're going to use queen charges, definitely upgrade this equipment, but if you're not and you're going to use other attacks, then delay any upgrades past level 9. As for priority, I would put the Frozen Arrow behind the Eternal Tome and the Giant Gauntlet, and perhaps even the Invisibility Vial, but I will analyze the difference between the Invisibility Vial and the Frozen Arrow in the next video. The Giant Gauntlet is easily a lot better because it can tank a lot more damage than the Queen can reduce with the Frozen Arrow in any given moment, especially since the Queen can only attack one defense at a time. And just to be frank, the Frozen Arrow is still a really good piece of equipment, but I just want to bring to attention the amount of investment that you're going to put into it, especially if you're not a queen charge player. That being said, the Frozen Arrow isn't the only thing that players should be thinking about investing into, as there are still dragon medals to spend in the shop, and if you don't spend them correctly, you're going to be wasting this event. Luckily, this guide right here will tell you exactly how to spend your dragon medals and to ensure that you get the most out of the Dragon Festival event.